I got this men's pound for pound rankings website pulled up, and I just kind of wanted to give my thoughts on it. Obviously, the big Volkanovski-Makhachev fight recently took place, which was essentially supposed to determine who pound for pound best was, right? Number one, Volkanovski took on number two, Makhachev's. Not every day you get to fight in real life, and it becomes more than a hypothetical debate. That's what makes pound for pound kind of rankings kind of a weird thing is, I mean, every time until the other day, it's a hypothetical argument, and then the actual fight takes place. Islam, by the way, wins that fight. You can agree or disagree. He won the fight. His hand got raised, right? But Volk's still pound for pound number one just because I guess he did good. Now, my podcast partner on Beefy Boys Breakdown, Harrison, agreed with that. He thought Volk showed enough to kind of prove the kind of conceptual argument of being pound for pound by being able to go toe for Islam. But I guess I had more of a caveman view of it of just like, but that guy beat that guy. How do you not like jump him in the rankings? Like I just had a hard time kind of getting past that. I know a lot of people. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think Volk should have stayed number one after losing to Islam, who was ranked number two? To me, that sentence is a mouthful. That's hard for me to get past. But a lot of people agree with that because he did good enough, I guess. I don't know. Next thing that jumps out to me is Leon Edwards at 3. And it's weird, right? Because the on-paper argument makes sense. Usman was number one when he beat him, so he's at least number 3. Like, I get that argument. Maybe it's just like a perception versus reality argument of, I just don't view Leon Edwards that way. Maybe I should. Maybe that makes me a hater. He's not the most active guy. I mean, he was fighting on fight nights against, Bilal not that long ago. And long, impressive win streak, I get it. And that highlight knockout of Usman will live on forever. I mean, that's an all-time knockout. Don't have a negative thing to say, really, other than just of, like, my perception of him. Like, I don't, in my head, I would have got that wrong in trivia. And I'm very tuned in with the UFC. Watch every weekend, big fan. But if you had asked me who's number 3 pound for pound in the men's rankings, I would have not have told you Leon Edwards. Even though the on-paper argument makes sense. So that's kind of interesting. Next, we got Usman. I think it is important that we still pay our respects to Usman. One, he was winning that fight, right? He got caught. Same thing with Izzy. Izzy's sitting there, that's such inconsistent in the logic because Izzy's ranked above Alex Pereira, who knocked Izzy out, but Izzy was also winning that fight. So it gets a little weird. That's why the whole pound for pound thing does get a little weird. Now, Aljamain Sterling, this is how you know I'm being objective. I'm not an Aljamain Sterling fan. Probably my least favorite champion, if I'm being honest, men's or women's. But that doesn't mean I don't acknowledge the skill and, I think he's a good definition of pound for pound. He's sitting there at 7. Also, Alex Pereira, I think a lot of people view him as a guy who could go win the 205 belt and maybe will go win the 205 belt. So you're talking about a double weight champion. To me, that kind of embodies pound for pound. Izzy, on the other hand, went up to 205 and failed pretty miserably. So it gets weird, like I said. But Sterling, very good bantamweight champion. Huge for the weight class. I think it's very easy for our brain to kind of imagine him having a lot of success at 45. Especially if I can throw in the caveat asterisk Volk isn't coming back to 45. Could Sterling beat Yair? Maybe. That's not a crazy statement to make if you say yes. So that, to me, that kind of embodies pound, at least my definition of pound for pound. I said it's a hard to even, what's the jumping off point? What is your definition of pound for pound? So that's why so many people disagree. I just wanted to give my opinion on pound for pound. Charles Oliveira, people forget how high he was riding before. It's just bad because he had the one loss and it was a really bad loss. And all his really good wins, he almost lost. So it's that's a really hard one to wrap your head around, Charles Oliveira. It's kind of the opposite of Aljamain Sterling for me. Like I said, I'm not a big Aljo fan, but I recognize his place and I agree with his place in the rankings. Maybe even could be 1 or 2 higher if you ask me in regards to Aljamain. But Charlie Oliveira, I'm a big fan, but it's hard for me to view him as 8 right now. It's tough. Brandon Moreno, the super small guys are always going to have the pound for pound argument because they are so small. It's kind of intrinsically built in. Whoever's doing the there's an argument to be made that you're doing the most with the least, like those little 125 pounders, like to have a lot of success in that frame. Like some people's definition of pound for pound is like, oh, if this guy was this size, how would he do? And I think people, if you envision a giant Brandon Moreno, that's pretty goddamn scary. That's kind of silly of a way that is to talk about it, right? The flyweights, that's kind of what you got to do, like envision how they, like what they would look like at bigger weight class with that skill set. And I think a giant Moreno sounds terrifying, so that's actually kind of fun. John Jones still sitting there at 10. That's like a weird 10. It's like largely due to inactivity. I think you're better off removing him from the rankings than to have him at 10, because it kind of just doesn't make sense to have him at 10. Remove him for inactivity. Don't have him at 10 because that just doesn't make sense. He's arguably the greatest of all time. He's going up to fight for a belt at a second weight class. If he gets the belt at heavyweight, like he may jump all the way to 1. So to have him sitting there at 10 seems a little fugazi. Just remove him if it's an inactivity argument. Yuri is a real interesting one, right? Because, well, not with John Jones coming, but maybe even with John Jones coming, I think it's easy for the mind's eye to have fun and imagine Yuri fighting a heavyweight because he is like 6'5". He's a giant light heavyweight. And also, I think he would have a lot of success against if a guy like Izzy came up too. So I think that's why Yuri, I don't mind his place. He's out with injury, vacated the belt, but I think having him at 11 isn't crazy. See, Poirier at 12 is a little weird for me. Because what Oliveira did to him, what I think we all think Makhachev or Volk would probably do to him. Very good fighter, but when we're talking pound for pound, you're talking best of the best. Elite of the elite. I don't necessarily love Poirier at 12. I get it. Like his body of work, his career, Hall of Fame worthy for sure. But like as we sit here today, have him at 12 is a little interesting. There's an argument to be made. I'm just not going to make it, if that makes sense. Like I kind of view it differently. And Poirier could convince a guy like me. He's flirted with going to 170 multiple times. He called out Colby Covington. I was one of the only people that really, really wanted to see that fight. I think that'd be an amazing fight. It makes a lot of sense for both guys. So if Poirier went and beat a Colby Covington, then I'd shut my mouth and I'd move him up the rankings. But as we sit today, having him at 12 seems a little weird. Jamal Hill at 13 feels about right. Like he's the light heavyweight champ, right? I think he's a real big guy too. Also looks like a guy that could cut some weight. So I think it's real easy for the mind to imagine maybe him bouncing a weight class up or down. He has the crazy power. I think at 13 is good because we haven't seen the body of work is still pretty limited, especially at the highest level. So I get having him at 13 as opposed to higher, but I am glad he's on the list. I'm also a Jamal Hill fan. I'll say that. Robert Whittaker at 14 seems low, but it's almost like the antithesis of my Leon Edwards argument. If you saw Robert Whittaker on paper, the losses to Izzy and stuff, then I would understand. I understand him being at 14, but how in my mind's eye, once again, perception versus reality, kind of like I said, the opposite of what I was saying about Leon. In my mind, my respect for Whittaker's skill set is higher than this. Do I think Robert Whittaker pound for pound is better than Poirier? I would say yes. That's what I said. Poirier felt weird having him at 12. I think I just made the argument that Whittaker at 12 feels less weird than Poirier at 12, even though on paper, it probably is a bit better of an argument to be made for Poirier, but pound for pound is a very non-on-paper ranking system, as we just saw by Islam beating Volk and not passing him in these rankings. So it's all hypothetical. And hypothetically, I think Robert Whittaker, I'll take him over Poirier pound for pound. Rounding out the list is Max Holloway, which is at 15, which I'm cool with. Big Max Holloway fan. Who isn't? If you don't like Max Holloway, go fuck yourself. Cool guy. It's kind of like a tip of the cap of respect. Not that the resume speaks for itself, but he finds himself in kind of featherweight purgatory. It's a weird combination of he's been fighting forever and he's still young because he started so young. I think 15 is perfect because, once again, kind of like I said about Brandon Moreno, try to imagine a light heavyweight Max Holloway and tell me that's not terrifying if we're just having fun with it and it's a silly pound for pound list. So, yeah, I said I had a couple of minutes before the Beefy Boys podcast started, and I just wanted to give my thoughts on the men's pound for pound rankings as we sit February 26, 2023. That's when I made this video. Appreciate it, y'all.